Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com as well as on Amazon. And I have an announcement to make. Please notify your Attorney General in your state regarding solar panels made by Sonova or the Generac systems if you're having any difficulty with this company. Fill out the complaint form on the Attorney General's site. Okay, I've got a brand new guest on. I'm happy to have Agness Mccurry on. We're going to talk about family court corruption in East Tennessee as well as case fixing. So I totally welcome you, Agness Mccurry. I met you on TikTok and now we're friends and you've got a lot to tell me. So what has been going on in your case?
So I feel like my case has really evolved since it started. Originally, it started as me seeking an order of protection against my ex-husband because he had made numerous threats to one, unalive me and my son. Two, he also made threats because I'm an immigrant. Currently a permanent resident. But at the time, I was just a student. I was on a student visa because that's where me and my ex-husband met at East Tennessee State University.
Mm-hmm.
So we consequently married, and I had a child for him. And that's how within the marriage, he started becoming abusive towards me. And I was naive. I was brand new to the United States, so I didn't know a lot of things, but I could definitely know and feel like any human being that something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And once the abuse started in the marriage, and which is unfortunately an issue immigrants face when they marry some Americans and even permanent residents, is that they can control you through those types of establishments to do their will. And never in my whole life did I ever think I would be a victim of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
So for the longest, I actually felt shame, as most victims do, that you perceive yourself to be somewhat strong and you think I can never be abused. But once you learn about how abuse is, it's very subtle and it progresses over time. So that's where I was. I'm just trying to live my life, get back
Mm-hmm.
on track with my education, but I couldn't because of my um, morning sickness I had with our son. I stayed home, so I did everything
Mm-hmm.
and I took care of him. So once the abuse started, I felt it was very unfair, especially when he made the threats to even deport me and weaponize the police. So we separated in late August of 2018. Our marriage was rather short. We married September 24th of 2016. So it did definitely escalate, especially once I was pregnant with our son. So I went to the court with my restraining order that I had filed and was served upon him. And I was amazed because at that time I knew something was wrong, but I didn't realize that was the beginning of case fixing. I
Mm-hmm.
tried to go inside the courthouse with my domestic violence advocate, and there I was met with my ex-husband's attorney, Donna Bolton, and she basically blocked my entry into the courtroom and said, let's go into this adjacent room. In the adjacent room, she basically threatened me with loss of custody and even brought up my mental health because at the time I suffered from postpartum depression, which made me suicidal on top of the domestic violence. So I
Mm-hmm.
told her I'm not giving up custody of our son. And she said, okay, fine, then sign here, accept service of the divorce. So then, of course, I'm just thinking it's just service of paperwork. I tried to go back inside the court. Now I see her go all the way to the front and speak to the judge one on one. So I'm watching this with my advocate because, if you don't know how the legal process works, you just
Mm-hmm.
watch and you don't really say anything. Next thing I hear is case dismissed. I'm like, wait, what? So she gets her belongings, starts rushing out of the courthouse and I ask her, why is my case dismissed? She's like, oh, it's been moved upstairs. It's going to be heard with the divorce. Go get paperwork from the clerk. So I get the paperwork from the clerk. And I leave with custody of my son, like because to my knowledge, the order of protection is still active.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
whilst at the legal clinic, which my advocate suggested, I get a phone call saying, surrender custody of your son. Benjamin has custody now. So I'm confused. I'm like, no, you told me it's been continued. What do you mean I have to surrender custody? So I have some attorneys there at the legal clinic and they chime in and start talking to her. And that's how she informs them. And they tell me, oh, Benjamin now has emergency custody of the child. I'm like, how did he do that? And that's how they were like, apparently you dismissed your restraining order. I was like, I did not. I didn't even have a hearing, and my advocate was there with me. And she was
Hmm.
like, no, she didn't have a hearing. She said they told her it was pushed. And
Hmm.
that's how they spoke with Benjamin's attorney, and Benjamin's attorney told them, tell Agnes to check her paperwork. So I checked my paperwork, and there's a dismissal order signed by the judge saying I voluntarily dismissed my restraining order. I was like, I didn't even go before the judge at all. But at that time, there was nothing I could do because that's what the paperwork says, right?
Hmm.
So she told them she's going to get the police if I don't surrender custody of my son. So I did that, and basically that changed the course of my case forever up until where it is right now, because family court is about control. And the
Hmm.
one who controls, especially if they're children, the one who controls custody controls the other parent for a significantly long period of time. And that's what happened to me. So I became depressed and I went home. I remember that night it was dark. And that's how I basically got the paperwork, read through it, and I saw the lies and the falsehoods. Like my ex-husband to get emergency custody was literally saying I was some form of illegal immigrant whom he had not known the immigration status of. So he's steered all these lies to get an outcome in his favor, which was granted, as well as other false allegations on my
Hmm.
mental health, because I did have depression that was so bad, such
Hmm.
that I was in like a psychiatric, I guess in Florida, they call it being Baker acted is what it is. But it's something like that. But I didn't even take long. It was like for 3 days or so, but I was breastfeeding my son. So I guess that's why I came out and I took the depression pills for some time, but I just made lifestyle changes because I don't really like pharmacy type of methods.
Yeah.
And my lifestyle changes were, which included me stopping to breastfeed because a lot of it was hormonal. So
Hmm.
that's what triggered my depression even more so. So I didn't like that, but I had to because mentally I was under a lot of pressure being stay at home and going through the abuse. So my son was consequently put into formula at 6 months of
Hmm.
age. And even I saw my body even stop making breast milk. I started to struggle. So, it was the end for me, but I went through that regardless and I did my best with it. But it was also the following year in 2018 when I said, you know what, after Isaiah turns one, I'm ending this relationship because for my whole life, I didn't know what depression really was because I was happy, I was single, I was living, my best life, doing what I was on campus. I was
Hmm.
really performing very well in my program, biomedical engineering. So
Wow.
I wanted
Yeah.
that life back, you
Right.
know. But this relationship it was not it for me, and it wasn't promoting my best interests. So now I found myself being thrown into the legal arena, and I was like, my whole life I've never gotten in trouble with the law. Now I'm in the United States. There's this animal called the judiciary. I told God, I said, I can't make it. I don't know what to do. It was very intimidating, you
Hmm.
know. And that's how he just told me, well, start reading the paperwork. And luckily at that time, I had like almost like 2.5 years of college experience. So there was one class which became very useful to me was critical thinking and argumentative writing. because that's a great skill that self-represented parties, if they go into court, that's where these lawyers prevail because, for you to go into law school, they say you should have a degree. And then you'll be able to do your law because that's where your degree is offering you certain courses like research and analysis, which they're not going to teach you that once they start the law because they assume you know how to do that. So that became useful to me and
That's
I
good to
started
know.
researching. Huh?
That's good to know.
Yes, so majority of the law consists of critical thinking and argumentative writing. So I learned that in my second semester as a freshman. That's when I took that English class. So it was very helpful learning all those skills that they taught, such as if this is your point, you have to learn what the opposing side, you have to anticipate the weaknesses to your argument. How are you going to counter that? Because that's basically what you have to do in the law. So even though I wrote myself off, God's reminding me that you have something, kind of like Moses and, look at the staff in your hand. That's kind of
Yeah.
like what happened to me. Is like you have this staff in your hand,
Hmm.
use it and, throw the staff here. It'll become a snake, grab it and that gift you have, God can use it to do other things.
Hmm.
So that's basically what I used, and I also took like a little freshman computer class that taught us how to search, like how to use a search engine,
Hmm.
because nowadays with the way case law is, people don't realize that there are cheat sheets to how to search for case law. I think I made a video on my TikTok page. I told people about something called, I think it's called Boolean operators and or quotation marks, all of these things. Because for me, once I learned that, I was able to kind of cheat my way in case law because when you search, for example, parenting plan, it'll search for parenting and plan, separate words. But
Hmm.
if you put quotation marks, parenting plan, meaning one word, and you're looking for some, and you use like and, so parenting plan in quotation marks, space, capital AND, and then you also say modification in quotation marks, it allows the source you're using to search for case law to show you cases of parenting plan and modification. So these are all the little things that self-represented parties may not be aware of, and that's where these judges and lawyers take advantage because you can only access that information in higher education unless maybe they're teaching it in high school. So I was pointed to all of those skill sets, which I share with people on my page. There are other sites now which can at least like just teach you critical thinking and argumentative writing, which is good. And I let people know because I felt that I saw a lot of tools that empowered me on my journey. And I share those with individuals because, I was laughed at. I tell them I went to court and I was laughed at.
Oh,
I
me
was
too.
laughed at by my ex-husband's
Yep.
attorney because I did not know objections. I didn't know what type of an objection when the judge would ask me. And that's the biggest, confidence
Mhm.
drop as a self-represented party is when the judge has to lecture you about something you don't know.
Now, when they got into the courtroom, did the opposing side talk first and then you got to talk next? Why is
Yes.
that?
Well,
There.
because that's part of case fixing. With case fixing,
Yes.
they already let you know who's calling the shots.
Uh-huh.
Because until you start to assert yourself, they're basically going to say, take the back seat. We're the ones leading this case. This is the
Hmm.
agenda. And it's not that they do that because they just want to do that, but it's because, see, they catch people off guard. That's why they already you don't know what you're doing, so we're going to do it for you. But if you come prepared, it's very hard for them to do that because they know you're going to put up a fight. So most people find themselves in those circumstances, which I was. So I had to learn how to assert myself as the case progressed with the knowledge I had to learn.
Now, with all this knowledge, did they turn around and call you crazy?
Yes,
That's what they did to me
absolutely.
too. Yep.
Yes. So when you start empowering yourself and they see that, oh, person that we thought we could contain is getting bigger than us.
Mhm.
I thought an appeal was okay, but that can be too big if they're trying to case fix. What do you mean you're trying to, seek review of the judgment? They have a finality mindset. This is final. What do you mean an appeal?
Mhm.
And I trusted the appeals and Supreme Court until my judge, which I always talk about on my page, that was when I technically established the grounds for modification, and he knew that. But first of all, the judge, and this was back in May 5th of 2022, at that hearing where I filed for emergency custody because my ex-husband was violating the parenting plan, which he knew with his fiance at the time, and the judge knew as well. But
Mhm.
his attorney, she left. Let me not say withdraw representation. She just didn't show up at all. And still to this day, there is no document showing that she withdrew representation. So that's very serious, but the judge allowed it. My ex-husband said I'll be pro se, and the judge basically appointed himself to be the attorney and the judge in the proceeding. That's what happened. He was attacking me, you know. And
Oh.
then when I told him I'm going to appeal, and that's the famous transcript I always remind him of because they do watch my TikToks. I said, Judge, you said, Agnes, you can appeal until the cows come home. The Court of Appeals and Supreme Court will agree with me 100%. So I didn't understand the
Oh.
gravity of what he meant because to me, I read opinions. I told myself 30 minutes to an hour every day, I'm going to learn the law. And I learned it by reading the opinions of the appeals court and Supreme Court. There were a lot of challenges with my writing. I never used to use case law because I understand self represented parties who believe if I tell the judge the truth, he'll hear me out. You know, no case law, no authorities,
Mhm.
that didn't work. So that's why my case was stuck for years because they took advantage of that because of procedure. You
Mhm.
have to have a legal authority, and if you don't, they'll take advantage by dragging things out or making these orders that are just not
Mhm.
what you expect. So when I improved and I did that, now they came after me, and now that's why my judge made that threat. I ignored him. I went to the appeals court, and now I have over 30 appeals, and they are basically now been performing according to what I was threatened that I would appeal until the cows come home. But for me, because of my background, I want to test your hypothesis. Is it true I'll appeal until the cows come home? Yeah,
Yeah.
that basically is what they did. But I didn't understand what it was until I started researching case fixing. And that was after
Mhm.
I read a DOJ investigation into a judge who was sentenced for case fixing. But this was just in a traffic ticket type of
Mhm.
situation. So this was Joseph C. Waters. He's from Pennsylvania, I believe. He was a judge there and he was fixing tickets. Some of them were felonies. And,
Mhm.
he had this scheme there of favors, and I can write off that ticket. And, when you do that, the government steps in. So then I thought to myself, case fixing. So I asked ChatGPT, what is case fixing? And I was like, oh, this is my case. And this is what everybody else has been talking about in family court. And I was like, why don't the feds, investigate? Why don't they step in?
Mhm.
Because this is what people are saying. Because one thing I also learned in the law is that you always have to state the main point. But the problem is that some people approach the courts with, I'll say all of this and the judge will figure it out.
Mhm.
They're not going to figure it out. Now you leave it open to their interpretation of what they think it is,
Mhm.
So you always have to state your main point. So now, like you said, they call you crazy. Now I talk about case fixing. Now I'm insulted even more.
Mm.
You know, my current judge in my case, Judge D. Kelly Thomas, literally put down an order because I said there's case fixing. He called me delusional, and I'm suffering from delusional thinking. But I was like, I'm not. Everything I'm saying is really what's been going on,
Or they don't want to
literally.
hear it. He doesn't want to hear it.
Right. Like, it's case fixing to the point where I even made a video recently about an order that was put down after I was wrongfully incarcerated
Oh.
because of my status on the Violence Against Women Act, the VAWA. I
Mhm.
was arrested on February the 7th of 2023, right? Because my ex-husband's attorney, just like Miss Donna Bolton, now this is Sandy Phillips, she tells the judge her vow is expired. It was not. So because I exercised my due process rights to basically object and say it's not, and to show the evidence, I found myself in jail. And next, I found myself with a criminal case of resisting arrest and assault on a first responder, which didn't even happen. Resisting arrest is a common charge that police officers love to throw to people, you know, especially when they know there's no resistance, especially if you watch the body cam. But if there's one charge any officer can get away with at throwing at you is resisting arrest. Stop resisting. You're not even resisting, you know. So that's what happened. And then I was in jail basically from something like 10:30 to like 1 p.m., somewhere there. Then I was brought back. I had my whole hearing now in handcuffs, so I couldn't write. So they suppressed every way for me to challenge a fraudulent sole emergency custody order, which said I suffered from a mental illness because of my brief in my appeal, my pleadings at the Court of Appeal. So now, when I exercise my right to an appeal, I
Mhm.
filed a brief and I filed motions in that court. Now it's a mental illness and I deserve the loss of custody. Things that are basically protected by the Equal Protection Clause
Mhm.
of the United States. You can give evidence, you can be a party to a proceeding, but that was criminal. But it only happens in case fixing when the family court turns into a criminal RICO enterprise. That's when they criminalize everything that is basically legal and lawful. They'll say that's criminal because you're not talking to normal people. You're talking to criminals. It's a criminal court
Mhm.
against the public. It's a government versus the people, you know, and they're very afraid is what I can say and what I've learned, because if you go in they can't go public with it, they have to hide it, and judicial immunity is a great cloak of hiding the case fixing that is ongoing in family court. Once you read the ethics for judges and you read adjudicatively what their responsibilities are, and then if they violate that, they're immune from civil, a civil lawsuit, but criminally they can be prosecuted. But who's going to criminally charge a judge? You
Mm-mm.
know, because they're over there saying, that's not too bad that the judge did this, but you're not the one paying attorney fees. You're not the one that lost your
Oh,
house or lost time with your child.
right. And on top of that, you're a pro se, so you're not paying into the game.
Exactly.
So that
You're not
judge
paid.
hates you.
Right, exactly. It's like move on and whatnot.
Ah.
So that's what it is. So honestly speaking, my experience with my fellow counterparts on TikTok is I now get it. You know, people always wondered. I understand what victims of sex trafficking and human trafficking face. It's happening in broad daylight.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're around them. You can be around it in the mall and it just looks so normal to you. But that person, that man with that girl over there, he is trafficking her, you know,
Hmm.
and she can't say anything because something may happen to her, because that's what's happening. These proceedings are happening and they are criminal.
Hmm.
Parents are being put in jail, but nobody can see it. because it's masked to just be something very normal. Like the judge is just doing their job. No, those are civil rights violations.
Right. And it's become normalized. I don't want that.
Exactly. And well, it's become normalized because if you study how the process works, you realize how they get away with it. I think the insanity allegations get worse because nobody would ever think a Supreme Court and appeals court would basically write an opinion that is false deliberately to protect case fixing at the trial court. But in my case, it is real, and for many people too. It's just that nobody really had an admission like I have in a transcript of where my judge said they will agree with me 100%. No, but that is not just, nonsense talk. He was sure. And I even remember it like yesterday. He was high and mighty in his robe, and this is Judge Lauterbach.
Hmm.
He was very sure the way he was talking. And that basically has happened to me. I've had some people, talk about me in the past and be like, well, Agnes, all your appeals always get dismissed. All of this always gets dismissed. But now when I talk about case fixing, and I showed that transcript, they now understand that it doesn't matter what I do because of the conspiracy, because of that proof of an agreement,
Hmm.
they will always rule against me. But the problem is that now, if you don't know how to challenge that, it becomes an issue. And that's where knowledge is power. So
Hmm.
I started reading and sharing what my thoughts are because I got upset with seeing other content creators come online and tell people if you take a family court case to the federal courts, they're not going to hear you, right? There is truth and there's not truth to that. And that's where how you approach the federal courts is important.
Hmm.
The federal courts cannot give you custody of your children. That is a state court matter. So if you
Hmm.
approach the federal courts basically trying to get custody, they won't hear you. You have to go in a different direction according to jurisdiction, which is
Hmm.
deprivation of rights. That's the first thing. And then again, on deprivation of rights, you also have to understand the animal code judicial immunity. You cannot say your rights are deprived by a judge's decisions, and that's your basic, or your basic argument. They'll throw that out because they'll say adjudicatively, a judge is 100% immune. So you also have to learn about that. So then you're like, okay, then what do I do with the federal courts? And that's when you learn about looking at lawsuits involving non-judicial acts. And that's where you see other lawsuits. I was so amazed
Hmm.
that in the 80s, in the 70s, this has been going on. This case fixing has been going on. But there were some people who filed Section 1983 lawsuits that did very well, which I talked about on my TikTok page. And one of them was the Rankin case versus Howard. I was amazed when I read that case because they basically said if a judge agrees to basically miscarry justice deliberately against a person, that is a non-judicial act. And they said so because it frustrates impartiality, which is an expectation of the parties in the proceeding. So in that case, they basically took custody of a child by filing a false petition, and the judge signed off, which always happens in family court, right? But if
Hmm.
you sue because, hey, this judge granted this petition, that's when they'll say, well, a judge has a subject matter to grant that. You can sue a judge for that. But then you can sue a judge when they act in a clear absence of all jurisdiction. And in that case, if a judge granted a petition and there was no personal jurisdiction, meaning you were never served,
Hmm.
then that's where they said even if a judge has subject matter, it's concurrent with personal jurisdiction. So if one is missing, then the whole thing is basically void. So when I learned that, I was like, oh, that's basically what it is. So that's the education, is basically suing
Hmm.
for the agreement to conspire against you, showing the proof of it, and then making the claims of my rights were deprived because the judge lacked jurisdiction personally over me when they did this. So you want to basically state what the main issue is. So I feel like the only way to fix what's happening now is by looking at what happened before, because there's so many great cases, so much to learn from, and people that prevailed.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, when I was in federal court, I was, on Google Justia looking up cases, and I had everything. I had a case with merit. But when I went to drop off exhibits to the opposing attorney, he hauled me into a boardroom and he said, "Look, I'm going to tell you how this case is going to go. I know both those judges in the federal courthouse, and I'm going to get this case dismissed, and that's pretty much how it's going to go." I said, "Okay, have a nice day." So then I went and I filled out an affidavit and I submitted it to all parties. And yes, he did get in trouble.
Good. That's really good
Yeah,
because those comments are unacceptable because that's the proof of a conspiracy. The fact
right.
that you were able to have that evidence, that's the evidence I tell people to have is, you can use a judge's decisions, unless in those decisions, maybe they're confessing some things which they probably shouldn't put in writing, because
Hmm.
that's the proof of like if a judge puts down an order showing like what you just said, then yeah, that's pretty serious. But evidence like what you've just explained is where people need to learn and study and know. And the only way you can do that is like, you sharing your experience. When I found out this, and I took action, this was the result. So that people can know it's because she did this. This is what she uncovered. So I feel like there's a scarcity of knowledge into Section 1983 lawsuits involving family court issues. And that's where, I spend my time researching as hard as I can and explaining some things, breaking it down. And some people appreciate it because I'm constantly learning. I tell people I'm always learning. Every day I have to learn. I might find out something and I share it.
Hmm.
So we'll only empower ourselves by knowledge because these guys are the gatekeepers and they take advantage of it when we walk in the courts is she doesn't know this, he doesn't know this. It'll be a slam dunk, right? But
Hmm.
when you start to know, then eventually it's she's crazy. And from the days of Martha Mitchell, attacking people's mental health is a practice in this country when
Hmm.
they know something to be true and it offends somebody else, they'll attack your mental capacity like they did with her until she was proven, right with the Watergate scandal. And that's the same thing with family court. I
Hmm.
was just in a court hearing yesterday for one of my friends in Illinois, Dennis Merritt, and I've never seen the anger in the judge and opposing counsel with the type of arguments that he made. I'll summarize. Basically, he filed a federal lawsuit, and none of the facts were challenged about the fraud that was going on, the racketeering, you know, and the federal judge said that all facts taken as true, right? He
Hmm.
presented this judgment to his current judge, who is a byproduct of that federal lawsuit, because the chief justice had to appoint her to the case. So, because he said, give full faith and credit to this decision, I have never seen her get outraged. I have never seen opposing counsel accuse him of a mental illness over something that is in Article 4, Section 1 of the Constitution, full faith and credit.
Hmm.
So, full faith and credit is not going to be given to decisions that affect case fixing and racketeering. We are not going to accept that. We want our decisions our way, not the other way. So it was just amazing to see. But, you know, I'm so disappointed with the laws on HIPAA because
Mm.
that's another problem I feel like family court is getting away with.
Oh,
If
yes.
somebody violates your HIPAA, your protected medical information, you can file a lawsuit. That's what HIPAA says. So
Oh.
these family court officers, evaluators and all of them individuals, they can say things against our mental health, which isn't true because they won't be held liable. I mean, if it's a physician, yes, they will be punished. But for them, they're like, no, I cannot. So, how can family court be changed in a manner that there has to be a HIPAA enforcement where you do not, one, weaponize somebody's medical health, and two, misuse it, like in my case, to say something it never said. Matter of fact, my
Mm-hmm.
when I suffered from depression, it's documented that it's postpartum depression, no psychosis, nothing, right? No
Mm-hmm.
delusions. But my ex-husband's attorney is going to say, yeah, Agnes has delusional thinking and change the context of my records. She did that, and that's what she runs with. When I filed my actual records and I said, I even quoted the sentence, why have you all been lying on my mental health? You
Mm-hmm.
know, so we also need to see a change in family court regarding false accusations and attacks on parties' mental health. Judges should be disciplined for allowing, opposing counsel to call people crazy or abuse a psychological evaluation just because of the evidence a
Mm-hmm.
party is bringing to court or their legal arguments. I feel like lawyers need to be sanctioned for that and any party that engages in that.
It gets pretty crazy in there, and you get taken off guard really quick because, okay, I had been a nurse for 23 years. So all I was taking at night to fall asleep, because I had to get up real early in the morning, to get the kids, I was only taking a crumb of Ativan, like 0.25, very small dose. And when I was on the witness stand, the judge said, "What are you on?" And I didn't think anything of it because I mean, who isn't on Ativan? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And I should have asked him what he was on because I think Judge Sambrook, I think he had medical issues going on because he had died 2 years later of pancreatitis. So I think there was more going on with him. So I should have asked him the same thing.
He probably would have held you in contempt.
Yes.
How dare you? Because they're easily triggered by such types of questions. So, it's like, man, I mean, I listened to the recording because my godmother, she can listen to it because she breaks down because she saw when it
Mm-hmm.
happened in real time when the
Mm-hmm.
officers were arresting me because they grabbed my phone and they hang up on her. And she was on my WebEx waiting. And then this just happened to Agnes. So they really gave her, a traumatic episode you
Mm-hmm.
know. So, all because I was talking and just trying to rebut, arrest her. And he went and bailed for lunch break. So that's why I'm saying that if you try to ask your judge, he'll hold you in contempt over an innocent question.
Yeah. I'm just so appalled at the judicial system because when I was in federal court, we had a telephonic phone conference where Judge Lanslow wanted to know certain things. I was talking to him and I said, "Did you look at all the evidence I submitted?" And he admitted on the telephonic phone conference that he did not. So the next day I had to file a motion and run it in there for him to look at the evidence. And 2 days later, he wants to dismiss the case. So I took it to the appeals. That's the whole case fixing. They were all in this together.
Right. And it's so disappointing. And this is something that I was amazed by because we have 42 USC section 1983.
Hmm.
But why is it that even though we have that, federal judges are at war with it when we file our lawsuits? It's like I'm yet to find, I think we need statistics of Section 1983 lawsuits their approval rate and their dismissal rate by the federal judges so that we, the people, can really see what's really going on. Because why are these judges there if they don't want to hold these public officials accountable? Because it's like they don't like that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
They're there to shut it down. Well, I think I kind of know the answer is because maybe I feel like taxpayers have to pay when an official drops the ball because they don't have the assets to cover it. So I've
Right.
also learned that, even those lawsuits that prevailed, when the judge grants their settlement or something, it's basically not known. They like seal it so that the public doesn't know
Mm-hmm.
because they know how detrimental, I guess, it is, that information. But that's another thing. It's a gamble to find all those decisions where public officials are being held accountable because that's where these federal judges they abuse their discretion by saying do not publicize this.
Mm-hmm.
Though it's just a label, not for publication, meaning it's not published, so you can cite it. And that's where I feel like there's also needs to be reform that when it comes to Section 1983 lawsuits, so lawsuits holding a public official accountable, they should always be published. They should never be marked as not published
Mm-hmm.
because it's in the public's best interest to know what these officials are engaged in. Because
Yeah.
the problem is that it's to their discretion. When you read the rules about that, marking an opinion, you give the judges the power to decide which case they want to publish. I feel like it should be removed. It should just be published all the time.
I think they should just completely remove family court and put it into civil court where a parent can have a jury. I mean, you wouldn't have to run juries all the time because some parents wouldn't even want a jury. But if they needed one, they could
You're
get one.
right. I agree, but then when you start the organized crime, some juries can be corrupted. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like if you look at the criminal justice system, it's amazing what's going on over there. How
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if a prosecutor wants to steer a case in his direction, maybe they might put like for a man an all-female jury with one man. Because the Supreme Court said it's at least one. You get what I mean? So like for us, people of color,
Mm-hmm.
they can say it's an all-white jury with just one black person because the Supreme Court said it's not discrimination if there's at least one black person there because that's just what they've said. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so many people have had a miscarriage of justice as a result. So you can imagine, like, if there's a jury trial, right, and there's domestic violence, for example, I'm going to give one situation. If it's a man that's abusing his wife
Mm-hmm.
and you have a jury trial, right, the potential obstacles there is that when the jury is selected, they can have more men and less women. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
On purpose. And then the result is skew against you. So it has to be basically studied, even the whole jury process. What can we change in this country? I don't feel like it should be like that, like at least one. No, if there are five, then it should be five too. If
Mm-hmm.
there are five men, five women, there always has to be a balance. And if there's no balance, then you have to eliminate one juror so that there's a balance. I feel like stuff like that needs to happen, but I know people have talked about juries, but I'm like, you need to study the criminal justice system. The jury thing can also become detrimental if you don't study how they can, just because there's a juror there, people, I mean, some of them can be bribed in the background. You didn't see the money that went to their house. There's literally a case
Yeah.
that I laughed at last year because they were trying to get this, I guess, nonprofit federally for like they were like misappropriation of funds for like their program.
Mm.
One of them mailed, I think, over $200,000 cash to the juror's house, saying, "Please rule in my favor." I was like, "Wow." So the juror turned the money into the courts and they were trying to find out which of the defendants did that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things that we don't see behind the scenes, even with
Mm-hmm.
juries, that can happen. They can be bribed, you know, especially if you know them, because and abusers are all about financial control. So that
Mm-hmm.
can happen. And subsequently, even if sometimes even mothers can be abusive, they can
Mm-hmm.
have more women on the panel and one man. So then justice is like going to be dictated in that way. So I feel like it's just studying how the system is operating and more than likely working towards you know, how evidence should be admitted. What are we going to do when Child Protective Services already they do a terrible job with
Mm-hmm.
domestic violence? If you find a very bad caseworker, every time you show evidence of harm to a child, they'll come and say unsubstantiated, and the courts do not second guess that. I mean, some people have said the overturning of Chevron deference allows maybe situations like that to come under review. I hope so, because there's no way a video of abuse, harm to a child, the caseworker sees that, ignores it. It needs to come to court. It needs to be played. And, if
Mm-hmm.
there's a jury there, they need to see that this is what I told the caseworker, and these were her findings. So there's also that, because there there's not really like anything like a judge can deny evidence, like they respect that, but in the context of case fixing, that's detrimental to a lot of people's cases. That's something they're complaining about. The judge just keeps denying my evidence you know so what are we also going to do about that? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's how a judge will case fix, is by blocking evidence from coming into the record. So what are we going to do to address the case fixing in family court?
Well, even with the clerks may not even give the judge the evidence, or they may withhold evidence from the federal courthouse, as in when I was missing somehow exhibits M, N, and O. It's like, what happened to M, N, and O? So I had to recopy everything and take it physically to the federal courthouse.
Right.
Now,
There's also that problem.
I'm only saying this because my ex's wife works in the courthouse, and those are
Hmm.
very, very important exhibits.
See, and she can easily child. Who's Maryann? Let me see her file. I'm removing this. You know, and what are we going to do about that?
Right.
I'm happy that in the federal court I'm in, there's e-filing, and this is the Tennessee Eastern District. They
Hmm.
allow, well, mine, they allow e-filing. I heard that, over there in the Middle District, they just recently may have started e-filing for self-represented parties. So federal courts are not even uniform when it comes to granting self-represented parties e-filing, which again is an equal protection clause violation, because we are allowed to participate in the proceedings. You know, it's also a violation of Title II, Public Accommodations of the Civil Rights Act. Why can we not access
Hmm.
these courthouses? Because that's where, like you're describing, no, Maryann, please come and bring the paperwork to the court so that the clerk will touch it and something will happen.
Hmm.
But with e-filing, you are in control of the submission of your documents. And if something is missing, they can just say, well, we have the following that you filed. And
Hmm.
they will tell you, right? There's that. But I've also heard stories now of the other side
Hmm.
where they delete documents. A clerk can do that, but because of e-filing, guess what? It sends you a notification. Hey, this got deleted from the record. They forget about that.
Oh, that's
And this
important
happened
too.
in Florida. There was a mom that would forward me the emails, and I could not believe it.
Ah.
Like getting rid of it, but because the system is electronic, any action you do, it notifies the parties. So there's just an attitude of wanting to case fix, commit crimes, take
Mhm.
bribes, People want to win so badly.
Mm-hmm.
Chief Justice Roberts recently, I talked about it on my page, when he was basically criticizing people like me, people like you and others on social media, bringing basically the courts to the public and showing them what's really going on. He
Mm-hmm.
said some things that were truly outrageous, trying to suggest that we're making plans to promote basically a terrorist attack to the courthouse. And this is the Chief Justice. And I'm like, first of all, are you on social media? Like, he said he's not going to mention names. And I'm like, well, that means that you can basically say anything and take it to the extreme, and nobody's going to ask you, how exactly? Because
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed. I was like, but in this country, you have to make people look dangerous or
Mm-hmm.
perceive the public to view them as dangerous in order for, and then say, I'm trying to protect you. Don't listen to them, when they're
Mm-hmm.
threatened because, like my judge, he has a hashtag on, well, all of them have a hashtag. Even a clerk, I'll give them a hashtag so that if somebody is complaining, just type their name, you find the video so that we can have camaraderie and be like, oh, I'm not alone. This
Mm-hmm.
person is doing this, so he's the one that said they're winners and losers. And I was like, if you look up the definition of justice, first of all, you won't even find a proper definition. I think it's Cornell law that defines it the way that it's supposed to be. Justice is supposed to be a situation or a system of justice where you are correcting a wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's where there's the whole plaintiff and defendant, it comes from. The plaintiff is alleging the defendant has committed a wrong against them and they want the courts to grant them relief. But
Mm-hmm.
Chief Justice Roberts said it's about winners and losers. Wait, no, that's not justice, that's business.
Mm-hmm.
That is, yeah, sports, you know. But he was very serious about his comments, and that's why we have the problem in family court is the Chief Justice views cases as winners and losers, not
Mm-hmm.
what is right and what is wrong.
Very true. Very true. Even with these HIPAA cases, the opposing party may want, say, the child psychologist's notes to read them. And and these judges will rule, okay, you can have them. That's supposed to be tied in with a HIPAA thing.
I
Uh,
agree. Yeah, I agree. Definitely. There have to be safeguards there.
right.
And especially when other factors come in, I understand. And see, for me, I try to be very balanced and neutral on the subject. What are we going to do with the problem of domestic violence? It is here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of decisions change or should change when there's domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
But you find the abuser, male or female, is still given access to the children, is still
Mm-hmm.
given access to certain information they shouldn't be given access to.
Mm-hmm.
Why are juvenile courts utilized a lot? Because they can share concurrent jurisdiction with the trial court. I mean, that's a situation with the Pedro Argotti case. When I looked into it and I realized why he was so mad and did that,
Mm-hmm.
is because according to the Maryland statute, it literally tells you that if there are allegations of abuse, they basically some form of barring you from seeing the children, and it doesn't state for how long. It just says a judge
Oh.
can do this. So why should a judge take action like that without also saying refer for investigation to the juvenile court?
Mm-hmm.
So because there are allegations, like the statute said, it's allegations. And there's a mom in Maine, who showed me the court order. Mary and the ex was abusive, but he, case fixing, turned the whole case against her. And somehow now the judge is accusing her of child abuse. I was like, how did the judge make those findings when child abuse is a felony? but that's what these
Man.
judges are doing. And if the allegations are really true,
Hmm.
they should go for investigation and there should be due process there. But that's another problem in family court. If they can weaponize your mental health, they
Hmm.
can weaponize domestic violence and child abuse allegations. The other party can say that. Are we not going to investigate? Do we just take it as a gospel truth in family court? But that's really what's happening. And
That
a lot
is.
of parents have suffered loss of time because you're an abuser. The judge said so. How
Oh,
did
yeah.
the judge say I'm an abuser? You get what I mean? But
Hmm.
he put down an order right here and said you are abusive because that's what it is. As long as the judge signs off, it is what it is. But procedurally, it's because judges are jumping the hoop, but that's where the statutes come in. Your state house comes in because if this happens, if child abuse allegations are made, first of all, take them seriously, so much so you can temporarily, you know, order supervised visitation, but let it go to juvenile court. The judges should not continue to preside over the case. Let's go for an investigation. Because
Hmm.
some people have said, I had the video of the mother or the father molesting the children, and the judge refused to see it. And then
Hmm.
just said, let custody go to the other parent, right?
Hmm.
So that's what I'm talking about, is that the same thing applies even, when it comes to domestic violence. People have been punched,
Hmm.
wounded. The judge didn't hear me, still said that he should see the kids, right?
Hmm.
So that's what I'm talking about, is that we need to have, more, like if it's like domestic violence, assault is criminal,
Hmm.
right? So my thing here is that if somebody says somebody committed domestic violence in family court, refer that to the DA for investigation.
Hmm.
Why family court judges don't use their power of referral, I don't know why. But it's because they're missing statutes to tell them. Because a lot of times they're like, does it say that in the statute? When there's a loophole like that, that's
Hmm.
why they do what they do. But if you
Right.
specifically say this, then the Section 1983 lawsuits will make a lot of sense
Hmm.
because now we introduce things like that. When this is alleged, it goes here. When that is alleged, it goes here because that's where it's supposed to go. The DA and criminal court, because this is a criminal offense.
Hmm.
It's not a family court matter. So the family court should have its jurisdiction, and things that go beyond need to go where they belong. So
Well,
that's how we
right.
start solving case fixing by changing the existing statutes to start telling judges when this happens, refer here, refer there, bring, if DCS is necessary, bring them here and let due process happen and let's have proper, rules of evidence that, need to be applied there.
Well, for instance, I was under indication of emotional child abuse, right? And therefore, this is ultimately what caused my career loss of a nurse of 23 years. Okay. So even though I was cleared of the first charge, and then 4 days later, another charge came down of emotional child abuse. So we had to deal with that. That's another attorney day you have to pay for. And she did a good job. And the judge handling that, I was exonerated again. I was cleared of all these charges. However, the family court judge, Judge Robert Sambrook, continued the false narrative that I was abusive. So that's why I wonder what medication was he on? He didn't do the
Or
right
it's
thing.
Right. Or it could be some judges are just permanently biased.
Hmm.
Um, I was so amazed they talked about this case on my TikTok page of a judge in Texas. He sued two talk show hosts for calling him corrupt on a
Oh,
podcast. He won the lawsuit. And I'm like, you can sue us for defamation, but we can't sue them?
Right.
So how can defamation laws also be edited such that judges can also come under scrutiny whereby they should not be allowed to say anything they know to be false against a party? Because I feel like that judicial immunity is supposed to be fact finding. But
Mm,
if you didn't do an investigation, or like in your case, I think it's the same thing that's happened to Trump with the Central Park Five. They've
mhm,
filed a defamation lawsuit
mhm,
because even though they were exonerated, he still kept saying they were guilty.
mm,
So they filed a lawsuit to say at the debate, you brought us up and kept telling people we are guilty. We have been exonerated. So he's facing that lawsuit. I don't know what the status is, you
mm,
know, but, he's trying to allege immunity of some sorts. I don't know. But how are we going to come after the judiciary and anybody else within that system that tries to accuse us of things like in your case?
mm,
When like there's an exoneration or something that is not true. I know some people are going to say, well, Agnes, it's perjury and this and that. Well, perjury says you have to be sworn under oath, right?
mhm,
Meaning, if I'm sworn under oath and I say something that is false, then it's perjury. The judge is already sworn, you know. Will we charge the judge with perjury?
mhm,
But you can't charge a judge with perjury. That's unheard of.
mm.
But that's why the judge swears all of us, is because he himself is sworn. So he's the oath. And he gives the same type of extension of that oath to us. Do you swear? Because I'm sworn. So how does that play a role in case fixing when judges already live in a state of being sworn to uphold the Constitution, sworn to do the terms and conditions of their jobs, and they don't? What are we going to do about that? Now they're, defaming the litigants.
Well, I think the judges are delusional, a state of delusion.
I feel like it's because they've been case fixing for
Uh,
so long, and
right.
you're too smart. I don't like you, so I'm
Hmm.
going to manifest it, and I'm
Or,
just going to do that.
or you remind me of some girl that dumped me before prom. Now I don't like you at all.
Maryann, now that you've brought that up, some of the stories that I hear, judges now want to have relationships with people in the case.
Yeah.
In the case. So it's like, what's really going on? That's delusional for real.
Hmm.
When you see
Hmm.
those stories of the judge wanting to sleep with the prosecutor,
Mm.
the judge is sleeping with opposing counsel,
Yeah.
you know. So it's like, what's really going on? Like all of these things are happening. Where are the safeguards to justice? Because it's
Wow.
really a mess out there. And it's
I
going to get worse.
Right, and I hate to be dismal, but I'm being realistic, and I hate to be dismal at the same time. But I don't think, after what I've been through, I don't think it's a safe place to bring a baby into this world.
I would have to agree with you because it's getting to a point whereby, especially with what's going, well, it's so funny because I had this conversation with one of my friends where I was like, how they show kids the videos in high school so that they don't get pregnant.
Yeah.
Just show them family court.
Oh, definitely,
Show
definitely.
them family court. Show them our experiences and let them have a very good perspective of what they want for their lives because they really need to be showed because I feel like a lot of people, I mean, they're going to throw the whole abortion argument. I was like, just show them family court, show them the loss of assets that can happen, show them
Hmm.
how they can go to jail falsely,
Right.
show them all of that so that then they can be like, oh, wow, it's not just bringing a child into the world, but look
Yes.
at that.
Yeah, this is what this can turn into. It's so sad. I see these young parents with these little kids. It's like, just stay out of family court, watch out for false allegations. Just, I don't. I just feel so horrible for these people. I hope they have beautiful lives. I do, but I didn't think this was going to happen to me.
Yeah. Me neither. Twice or three times as much because I'm foreign. So for the longest, I also couldn't have custody of my son because what was thrown at me is, well, her immigration this, her immigration that. So my ex-husband weaponized his American citizenship against me. So that's something I had to fix. And I had to wait until, well, I became a permanent resident June of 2021. That pissed him off so much, so
Hmm.
much, such that the end of that year, he started a new relationship with the woman that ended up now basically championing the war against Agnes, because it's like, oh, now she's permanent in this country. So he hated that. So for me, it was a battle which was much harder. And that's why, consequently, they decided to get rid of me and still be on track with their plan to get my son and have me deported, right? So they thought because I I never got in trouble. The criminal case started in family court, on February the 7th of 2023. You know, when the judge ordered for my unlawful incarceration, I never got in trouble with the law. So they took advantage that we can't introduce criminal charges to Agnes because she's not outside that much. She doesn't get in trouble.
Hmm.
So they said, we'll catch her right there in family court. And yes, the judges take advantage. The one time they'll make that referral to the DAs when they want to charge you with a crime. You get what I mean? They won't do it
Hmm.
for other things. So family court is also a place to now, there's a family court to criminal court pipeline to send people to jail that
Hmm.
way.
Oh, at taxpayers' expense. I'm sure, the taxpayers should know all this is going on. It's so nice to know my taxes are probably putting some father or mother in jail right now as we speak.
Right.
Ugh.
But one thing I've learned is because let's do this because we're able to mask it because the criminal justice system, when people hear somebody saying, oh, I'm innocent. No, bro, you probably committed that crime. So if you're in family court and you've been unlawfully incarcerated, right? And you say, I'm innocent, they'll be like, he or she probably did something. So
Mm-hmm.
they view you negative because it's a smear campaign. It's so
Hmm.
narcissistic, right?
Yes.
So that's why they do that because, the public, even if they knew, they know how to say, Maryann violated a court order and they'll shut it down. Oh, that's what she did. Okay. But are those court orders lawful to tell people to shut up in a case?
Mm.
You know, there are court orders now where, like in Dennis's case, he has to submit case law 7 days before the hearing because at the hearing, the judge won't allow him to present case law. So he might find good case law after the 7 days, but the judge won't let him.
Mm.
The judge has an order. She made it up just to block him. So while we're not viewing constitutionality of these orders judges put down, don't just give them immunity for it,
Mhm.
you know, because that pipeline is dangerous, but it's caused a lot of misery and
Mm.
pain to parents right now. I can't imagine being in prison because of family court. Because
Mhm.
when I was in there, well, in 2023, I was there like February 7th to February 8th, I bonded out.
Mhm.
And then I came back in there because on October the 30th to November 2nd, because I was punished for recording my first appearance because my hearings, apparently they're not being recorded or there's something going on, but this is a criminal case though. It's supposed to be recorded.
Mhm.
But when there's organized crime and there's case fixing, even such records are booby trapped, I guess.
Mhm.
So I was
Mhm.
punished for recording because they put down an order at the courthouse just for me to stop people from recording because they're doing that pipeline at the expense of taxpayers, you know.
Mhm.
So I was in there. Then finally, from December the 13th to December, no, actually, it was December the 6th to December 26th. But I actually had the hearing December 13th. The judge said I should be kept in jail, no bond. And that's Judge D. Kelly Thomas Jr. Because of more fraudulent contempt orders that were put down against me because there's need for Benjamin to always have custody of the child. Agnes should never have custody. So basically now justice is rigged. It's not what
Hmm.
it is in my family court case. Nothing makes sense at all. But it only is coming together now because now I'm on the other side of knowing that it's case fixing. It's
Yeah.
really just case fixing, and it happens by, abuse of a lot of things, abuse of power, you know, abuse of court procedure, and all of these things. So when you see it, you're just like, wow, but there are no attorneys coming to tell you, hey, there's case fixing in family court because their number one duties to the court before they, serve you as a client. So meaning I think lawyers know that there is case fixing, but they never want to tell you. They're just like, sure, I'll represent you. Here's my retainer. And they give you them, their fees, and you jump in. And they're just like a slow kill. It's like the frog in the water, and they turn the heat up until
Mm.
eventually you're broke. And then you look back and you realize, wow, I paid all this money for nothing. I still don't have
Yeah.
custody of my children at all.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
the Lord just kept on delaying it.
right. Right. I spent approximately 45 to 50,000, then I called it quits because it's like I think I can do what they're doing. I mean, I just was, looking at the motions as a template and figuring it out. They didn't like that. And it was rigged because of people that knew people, and the opposing attorney and the judge had worked in the DA's department for years. So I tell people, if you want to win your case, find an attorney who worked with that judge in the DA's department. You're going to win your case.
Yeah. But if opposing side has money, money talks.
Yeah, I guess, well, the thing was, they were saying that I had money. It's like, I don't have much money. I mean, yes, I was married, but they were saying that my father had an Air Force pension, which is a
Oh,
joke.
wow.
He was only in there for 4 years. He was not getting no Air Force pension. I hated to break that to him.
Right.
But I
But
was
that's sad, though, that they
right,
were even saying she has money. Wait, what does that got to do with justice?
right. Oh, exactly, exactly. And even as a pro se, they were still saying, "Oh, her father has an Air Force pension. That's why she's, I don't know, knowing all this stuff that they didn't like." It was just a big
Wow.
mess. It's a mess, you know.
Wow. But don't you feel like that's kind of how it is? Like,
Yeah.
because I mean, there've been cases, I mean, I've read so many of them, it's truly outrageous. There was one where the judge had, Judge Celebrezze, I think, the Marshall Project reported on her. She had an inappropriate relationship with the attorney. Well, first she was cheating on her husband. She eventually, I guess, maybe possibly divorced. So she's now, they had pictures of her kissing this man. And she was directing cases to him as a
Oh,
receiver to do like I think maybe some form of like mediation, but that was his benefit. He had
oh,
this inappropriate relationship, so the judge would forward cases to him, high net worth cases, you know.
oh, that's disgusting. I,
So yeah, so even when it comes to appointments of guardian ad litems or this person, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes,
mm-mm,
unfortunately.
mm-mm. And that's why, Agnes, that's why we're here to warn these people. We're here to warn everybody.
Yeah, to spread awareness about case fixing so that you're not crazy because, my heart breaks for parents that have committed suicide because
Hmm.
of what's going on in family court because nobody would believe them, you know. Nobody would understand. I was very amazed when I found a resource online, and it apparently came from a Harvard law professor, Professor D'Amato. He passed away, I believe, in 2018. He talked about case fixing because he was trying to help somebody in a criminal case was wrongfully incarcerated, and he went through the system, appeals federal and all of that, and he's a Harvard, law professor. So he's
Mm-hmm.
like, you people are writing opinions that are false on
Oh,
purpose to fix a case.
right.
Wow. He was mind blown. But he wrote an article, I think it's called The Ultimate Justice, when he talks about case fixing. So I was
Mhm.
happy to find somebody at that level exposed that the justice system consists of case fixing and judges with the desire and the plan
Mhm.
to fix a case against another party. So, but people need to be shown all of this because they think,
Mhm.
oh, it's just Agnes on TikTok talking about case fixing. No, I'm showing other powerful, legal resources of people showing that this is a justice system. It's a pay for play type of
Right.
situation.
I've had other guests on that have talked about case fixing and how their case was fixed. It's just unbelievably horrible. I'm so glad you came on. I'd like to have you back on again, if you'd like
Sure,
to.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Once an update comes,
Right.
I'll definitely come back and share my update because one thing I'm working on right now,
Mhm.
especially with immigration, I'll just quickly summarize is that if you marry a non-American, they tell American citizens this.
Mm.
You submit a federal contract with your government showing you're going to take care of this person. Even if you divorce, the contract is binding. So that simple fact is what's also caused the woes in all of my cases, is because when my ex-husband and I split, that contract was there. However, I never utilized that contract because, first of all, I made more money than
Mhm.
the 125% of the federal poverty guidelines.
Mhm.
Because when we split, as an immigrant, I couldn't even get, public assistance for me specifically. So I worked. I worked to take care of myself and my son. I followed that parenting plan. I did everything.
Mhm.
But after I became a permanent resident in June and he found his new relationship, he told me sometime in September, I think,
Mhm.
October, now this woman is posting my son on her Facebook cover page. She didn't even ask me. I had to find out. The following year, now I'm receiving attacks because I was a threat to his new wife, you know, because I'm not suffering and she's looking at me as he's trying to spread the lies about me. So
Mhm.
that's why there was a need to attack me, attack my character, and, boast about all of these things. That's why I have so many cases. And people think Agnes just, I was actually even mocked. She files all these lawsuits. That's why she's devoting her time, then getting custody of her son. Because I actually started there and you fought me.
Mhm.
And then in the process, you had me evicted from my apartment. You had me arrested with pending misdemeanor charges so that I can lose my employment with Walmart,
Mhm.
because I had to quit my full-time job with Bank of America. I couldn't do it and go to court and also represent myself. I
Oh.
had to cut my income. So
Mhm.
now when I actually need that support that you signed a contract about, you fight against me even more. And now that those facts have come out in my lawsuit with Judge Ronnie Greer, he's now silent because he wanted to continue the narrative of you're just this criminal woman who's lost custody of her child, like it's my own wrongdoing. But I showed him my letter I sent to USCIS since 2018. My story's been consistent. He
Mhm.
wants to deport me and he wants to take custody of the child. I've always said that since
Mhm.
2018. And that's why I had the Violence Against Women Act petition approved to protect me from domestic violence, which is that.
Mhm.
So I told him all of my lawsuits, this is what they are. You ridiculed me, and you started advocating for this person. You don't know who they are. So now don't get upset when there's a Q time lawsuit that I filed now involving the United States government to investigate to
Mhm.
realize everything has been false. State resources, taxpayer money has been spent on false claims against me.
Hmm.
False, and they're not happy about that. But it is what it is, you
Hmm.
know. So that's just how bad the domestic violence is. Once upon a time, you could literally sue in federal court for domestic violence until they took it away, saying it doesn't affect interstate commerce. I believe something like that.
Hmm.
I beg to differ. I'm hoping one of the things my case is going to bring change is to show that domestic violence does actually affect interstate commerce, like commerce in general. Because
Hmm.
look at my story, car repossessed, the bank gets sued. So many people have been sued for different things. My property manager and her company got sued for evicting me, but I was protected under the VAWA. They were getting funding from that. I'm protected from that. You know, all these sectors were affected because of a man that wants to promote domestic violence. So I
Hmm.
want that to come back in the Violence Against Women Act that we should be able to sue our abusers civilly in federal court. It can't be at the state court
Hmm.
because they're getting so many agencies that harm us, and they need to be held accountable. So that's something that's on my table
Hmm.
when it comes to like my little, suggestions for reform ultimately is to bring that back, that section that was taken out under the Violence Against Women Act. I can't really quote it from the top of my head, but a private right of action should exist under the VAWA for victims of domestic violence to sue, and
Hmm.
they should waive the statute of limitations like they have for children of sexual assault,
Hmm.
you know. So that's something I would really want reform to be. Then maybe abusers who get scared
Hmm.
that now they can sue, in fact, at the federal level, So, and also to have domestic violence as a RICO offense, because they have kidnapping there. I
Oh,
want
yeah.
domestic violence to be one of the predicate acts.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So
Uh,
that's another thing I want to hopefully promote and accomplish.
hmm. Well, how can people reach you if they have any questions?
Sure, they can reach me on TikTok, Agnes Mccurry 555, or I also receive emails at my name agnesmccurry@gmail.com. Some people send me an email, I read it, because either way they're court filing, so every day I have to check my email. So
Yeah.
that's how they can reach me there or send me a message on TikTok.
Well, you're a wealth of knowledge. I totally appreciate you. Don't jump off, okay? Slam the
Mhm.
Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't even know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Agness Mccurry, for all your knowledge on these subjects. And I wish you the best, and we will keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Marianne, and keep doing what you're doing and spreading awareness and sharing stories like mine so that the public can know what's going on in family court.
I agree. And the taxpayer.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Agnes.